Hey, so I just got back from seeing Paranormal Activity 3 at the cinema, and what with it being Halloween and all, I just thought I would talk about scary films basically, and talk about my scariest films. Now I know the term scariest film is it's completely dependent on the person, and I know that if you asked 10 people what's the scariest film you've ever seen, chances are they won't all say the same film. So this is completely, in my opinion. So it's just, these are my personal scariest films I've ever seen, if you like. I just thought I'd quickly do a little review of Paranormal Activity 3. It was good, but I would describe it as like a ghost train, in that it's like in a ghost train. It's scary and frightening at the time, but by the time you get off on the other side, you think, okay, right, what next ride can I go on? And the way I can relate that to Paranormal Activity 3, it's just so full of suspense, waiting for jumps basically. And by the time it got to the end, now I give kudos to the end. It's the ending's very good and scary, but it just got to a point where there were so many. You kept waiting for jumps for so long that by the time it got to the end, you were so waiting for jumps that they weren't as jumpy anymore. And I think having too many jumps in films, it's kind of you're kind of glad that they're over. You wait for the jump happens, and you're like, oh, right, the jump's over. Wait for the next one. It didn't really build up, but I did enjoy it, and at the time it is a good fun film to watch. But afterwards, I didn't have much effect on me afterwards. But yeah, it is a good film, and I've seen Paranormal Activity 1. I haven't seen 2, although I know what happens in it. I have seen some scenes, but I haven't seen it all the way through. So I guess I would recommend Paranormal Activity 3, particularly if you have seen 1 and 2, because Paranormal Activity 3 does explain. Well, it doesn't really explain. It just shows how the origins between the demon getting conjured up and the possession of Christy and Katie. And I also like the effect of having I don't want to give too much away just in case you haven't seen it, but the effect of having the camera on the fan, and as the camera pans across the room slowly, I like that effect because it's you're waiting for a jump, but because the camera's moving, you don't know whether it's going to be on screen or off screen, and you don't know whether the camera is going to move into it or move away from it. You don't know whether you're going to see and hear the jump, or you're just going to hear it, or whether nothing's going to happen at all. So I did like that effect. I thought that was quite a good effect. There was some the only sort of criticism I have of it is films that try to be realistic as possible are often the scariest, because often you can relate it to real life, and you think, oh, it could happen to me, yada yada. But films that sort of try and be too realistic can be quite artificial. Like, for example, setting up the cameras in the bedrooms while at night time. Fair dues, they want to pick up Paranormal Activity, but there's a few scenes where Dennis, who is the girl's stepfather, is filming himself watching the videos back, which I didn't really get. I thought, would you film yourself doing that? And there are some scenes that were obviously everything's on handheld cameras that I thought that you wouldn't really film, but obviously you have to get everything, all the dialogue, up on screen, and the only way they could do it was on handheld cameras. So yeah, it is a good fun scary film at the time. I prefer the first one. I thought the first one was good and scary, and actually had a bit of an effect on me. It did make me feel slightly uneasy after watching it. So yeah, that's my review of Paranormal Activity 3. Go see it. If you enjoyed the first two, you'll probably enjoy this one. So yeah, I'm going to talk about 4 films actually. I did try and pick a 5th one because I know people usually pick do their films in multiples of 5, like top 5, top 10, top 20. But I just couldn't think of a 5th one. The first one I'm going to talk about is this one. It's called Dead of Night, and it's quite an old film. It was released in the 1940s. It's not really a film as such. I would say it's a little bit like The Twilight Zone in that it's a collection of scary clips and stories. It basically follows the story of a young man who's plagued by these nightmares, and he can't quite work out the meaning of them. And he's invited to this meeting at this mansion, and he walks in and he recognises the people, or every person there, but he can't quite work out how he knows them. And then each go into telling anecdotes of creepy situations that's happened to them. But one of the stories which I found really creepy is the infamous ventriloquist dummy segment starring Michael Redgrave. It's especially from its time, it is so creepy. It's basically a story, follows the story of Maxwell, played by Michael Redgrave, in a brilliant performance by Michael Redgrave in this. And he's a little disturbed young man, and he's a ventriloquist. He has a dummy called Hugo, and Hugo is probably the creepiest little shit I've ever seen in film. And he ends up being overpowered by his dummy, and he sort of loses himself, and it becomes apparent that Hugo is basically overtaking him. So yeah, I think it's one of the first films that really certainly one of the earliest films to sort of delve into the horror of like losing our identity. I mean, for example, if you look at a classic case of the film Psycho, and if you look at, I suppose, in a more modern and conventional sense, the film Single White Female, like losing our sense of identity can be a really scary thing. And this film really delves into that. Considering it was made in the 40s, it was quite prolific to sort of highlight that. And also, which most horror films, particularly psychological horror films, do nowadays, it delves into the contradiction between science and psychology with the supernatural and like evil spirits. Like, it does question whether is Hugo truly evil, or if it was actually in Maxwell's head the entire time. If you like sort of Victorian Gothic, old classic British horror, I'd recommend getting this, and it's and it is very memorable. See, Empire gave it 5 stars, and Time Out says, nearly 60 years on, Ealing's compendium of spooky tales remains scary as hell. And I believe it is the see, it says here, I can't remember who it is. Oh, here we go, yeah. It is the film debuts of Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Peter Sellers. So, yeah. So, Dead of Night. I'm sure you can find it online, or I'm sure you can buy it on eBay for a cheap price. But that's my first scary film. I've recently become quite a fan of the J horror and K horrors. But I noticed that I did want to pick one for this, but I didn't know which one to pick. But I noticed that most of them, they more disturb me rather than scare me. For example, Audition, Old Boy, and Itchy the Killer. They more sort of made me feel uncomfortable and disturbed rather than scared. So I decided to pick one that actually did give me some, actually did scare me, and it's Ring. Now this is obviously the Japanese original, not the US remake, which I presume is probably more popular, unfortunately. But this it's just a really good and modern film. It really relates to modern life. I'm sure you're all aware of the story. Basically opens with two kids, and they have a sleepover, and they basically tell each other scary stories, and then one of them mentions to the other about this videotape that if you see it, you get a phone call. 7 days later, you die. And then one of them dies, and then the aunt of either the one who got killed or the one that survived, I'm not entirely sure, but basically the aunt of one of the kids decides to investigate, and she finds the videotapes, decides to do some investigation behind like who the girl was in the video. She finds some like really disturbing evidence about it, and goes to investigate, and I won't give too much away, but basically it ends with a really creepy, memorable ending. I think the one thing that I found most effective about being scary in this film is the fact that most of the horror films that have gone beforehand would often show horror in not very conventional styles. For example, Dracula would show horror in the form of a guy who could turn into bats and have long teeth and drank blood. Frankenstein would show the horror in the form of a creature made out of dead bodies. But this one showed the horror in the form of items which you use every day, videotapes and a phone. Well, I suppose DVDs nowadays, but back when this was made, videotapes were very common. So just like the sort of twist on how it makes it more modern and how you can sort of relate it to real life. Now, I'm really fussy when it comes to endings in films, because I really like a film with a good ending, because I think the ending will leave you with that taste in your mouth, whether it be a good taste or a bad taste. And this film does that. It builds up to it keeps building and building and building up, and then to that memorable, shocking ending, which I'm sure you're all aware of. I won't really spoil it for you. But, you know, the crawling towards him, I won't give much away. So it goes, the ending's shocking, but also, basically she discovers how to sort of stop the curse, but there is a way to stop the curse. But there is a special way of doing it. I won't spoil it in case you haven't seen it. So she works it out. So it kind of ends up with a to be continued. Like, will her method work? Will it not? So I like endings that have a sort of to be continued and leave you in the dark, basically. So yeah, it's a really good, fun, creepy film. And just generally check out J horror and K horror films. I think nowadays, mainly the only real people who are doing making real scary films nowadays are the foreign market, and particularly in Japan and Korea. Check out, for example, Ju-on, which is The Grudge, Ring, Audition, Itchy the Killer, Old Boy. Really good, effective, disturbing and scary films those are. But my pick is The Ring.